Hi, it's Eva Cartman, and you are listening to the Dream Big Podcast Show, the place to go to learn, laugh, and grow. Today we welcome Cal Newport, who has some amazing tips for all you big dreamers on how to be all-star students. Cal is a New York Times best-selling author and has grown a large fan base despite not having any social media accounts. We'll learn why technology can be both helpful and harmful in episode 144. You ready? It's time to dream big.
Welcome to the Dream Big Podcast Show. We're inspiring you to shoot for the moon, take aim and go. We bring to you amazing guests who truly love what they do. Every day they're living their dreams, and so can you. Dream big, take action to reach your goals. Are you pumped yet? It's showtime, let's rock and roll.
Hi, Big Dreamers! Before I introduce Cal, I wanted to let you know that you can now get my free Confidence Secrets course, which is over 1 hour of me teaching you about how to develop your superpower of self-belief. This Confidence Secrets course is going to be part of the Dream Big Academy that we launch later this year. But for a limited time, we are offering access to this content for free at dreambigpodcast.com/beta. If you're a younger Big Dreamer listening to this, please ask your parents to help you get it. Again, it's completely free for a limited time only, so please take advantage and get the course while you still can at dreambigpodcast.com/beta. Okay, now let's turn our attention to this week's amazing guest, Cal Newport. Cal is an associate professor of computer science at Georgetown University. In addition to researching cutting-edge technology, he also writes about the impact of these innovations on society. Cal is the author of 6 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Digital Minimalism, which argues that we should be much more selective about the technologies we adopt in our personal lives. Cal shares tons of great tips and strategies in this interview, and we'll include everything we discussed at our show notes at dreambigpodcast.com/144. Without further ado, here's my interview with Cal. Let's roll the tape. Hi, Cal.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you on the Dream Big podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure.
I know you're a prolific author, and today I want to talk to you about the many concepts in your books. But before we go there, can you let us know where you grew up and when you realized you wanted to be a professor?
Well, I was born in Houston, Texas. And then when I was around your age, actually, I moved to New Jersey. And that's where I lived until I went off to college. And I would say it was a couple years into my college experience where I realized that I was maybe good enough at the subject I was studying, computer science, that maybe I could be a professor. And that's when I got the idea that that's maybe what I wanted to do.
Wow. So in addition to teaching, I know you're probably more well known for your best-selling books. And I want to spend most of our time on your latest book, Digital Minimalism. But before we go there, I have a quick few questions about some of your prior books. Like, your first 3 books were aimed at students, and one of the books was How to Be a High School Superstar. I'm not quite in high school, but I know a lot of the listeners are. Can you give us a few quick tips from that book?
Well, it's a good question. So when I was a college student, I wrote 2 books that had advice for college students about how to be good students. I studied students who got really good grades and said, here's how they take notes. Here's how they write papers. Here's how they study for tests. And those did pretty well. And when I was going around the country talking about those books at various colleges, the story I kept hearing was that high school students were getting very stressed out, especially when they were thinking about trying to get admitted into college. So in that book, that high school superstar book, I actually spent time with a group of really remarkable students who were very relaxed and interesting and non-stressed out kids who still did well in the college admissions process. And I spent time with them and tried to figure out, well, what did they do to avoid being so stressed out by this process? And a big part of the answer was they actually focused more on just being interesting people and focused less on this idea that doing lots and lots of different things was the key to standing out in the eyes of admissions officers. So the motto of that book was do less, but do what you do better.
I think a lot of times students think that they need to do everything, and I know that can stress students out, but sometimes, like you said, less is more. So I can tell you, for instance, from this podcast, we release one episode per week, and it's a time commitment, but it doesn't take away from the other activities I do or my social life. But by publishing one episode a week, I've been invited to amazing events, and I get to meet so many interesting people. So I really like that advice. I know that another one of your books also has an important lesson for our big dreamers, and it's called Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And one of the central ideas of that book is that focus is a skill that we need to develop, practice, and get better at. So can you elaborate a bit on that idea?
Well, more and more, our economy is based on knowledge work, which is when people use creativity and skill to create valuable information just using their brain. So the brains of the workers in our economy is one of our most valuable assets. So if you study, what do you want to be good at? If you want to be good at creating value with your brain, focus turns out to be really important. If you are comfortable maintaining your attention without distraction really hard on something that's difficult but important, that's going to take you a long way. That skill is going to allow you to, for example, learn hard things quickly. It's going to also allow you to produce cognitive output at a fast rate. And so one of the big ideas I had in that book is that focus is getting more important at the same time that we're getting worse at it, because we're distracted all the time. We have these phones that are always pulling out our attention when we're at work. We have email inboxes always grabbing at us. And so the conclusion is, if you're one of the few individuals or organizations to really focus on your ability to focus and train it, just like an athlete might train their ability to run really fast or throw a ball really far, you're going to have a lot of opportunities in our current economy.
I always talk on the podcast about training your brain, and we know that if you want to get better at a sport, you need to practice. Well, your brain is just like a muscle also, and if you want to improve your mindset skills from looking on the bright side and being an optimist, to be able to sit and focus on one task for 30 minutes or an hour, that's something that you should practice too. But do you have any tips on how students can develop a greater focus?
Well, one of the most important things I've learned is that what you do in your time outside of when you're studying or outside of when you're working can really have an impact on how easy it is for you to focus when it comes time to actually concentrate. So in particular, if you get in the habit of every time you feel a little bit bored, you look at some sort of distraction. So you glance at a phone or a computer or at the TV screen, your brain learns, when I'm bored, I get a quick, shiny stimuli. Now, the problem with building that Pavlovian connection is that when it comes time to actually study hard or concentrate hard, your mind's not going to tolerate it. It's going to say, wait a second, I've been trained. When I feel a little bit bored, I get stimuli, I get distraction. I don't want to concentrate on this textbook for the next hour. I want to see something funny on YouTube, or I want to look at a funny website. And so one of the most important things you can do to get good at focusing is teach your brain it's okay to sometimes not have a lot of shiny distractions, to actually just be bored on a regular basis, to go somewhere without a distraction, to look at the clouds, to go for a long walk and not have anything else in your ears or anyone else to talk to. If your brain is comfortable being bored on a regular basis, when it comes time to focus, it says, I know exactly how to do this.
I love that. Like, one of my favorite things to do is go out in our yard without any devices and just get on the swing and think. So sometimes I'll meditate, and other times I'll go and practice my lines, because I did a rap song for my school talent show, and I would just go outside and practice that over and over and over again without any devices at all. But can you explain why the skill of focus is becoming increasingly rare in today's world?
Well, one of the things that is happening right now is that there is a growing segment of our economy, what's called the attention economy, which is worth trillions of dollars, which is dedicated to figuring out how can we capture people's time and attention. And so we have a lot of people spending a lot of time and attention to try to get us distracted and looking at lots of different things and moving around from this interesting thing to that interesting thing. And they're very powerful forces. In isolation, this is all fine. Of course, there's no problem with looking at an interesting clip or reading something funny on say, social media. But when you do it all the time, the end result is you lose your ability to focus. Just like there's nothing wrong with, let's say, eating a McDonald's hamburger. But if all of your meals are fast food, you're going to start to get pretty unhealthy. And so I think that's a lot of what's going on now, is that there's a lot of attention being spent to try to fracture our attention. And we've been a little bit negligent in keeping track of how much we're actually fragmenting our attention. So it's important to keep in mind there's a lot of people that don't want you to focus. And so it's up to you to prioritize it.
I agree that while technology has done a lot of good for our world, it also provides many distractions, which is the subject of your latest best-selling book, Digital Minimalism. So you don't even say technology and specifically social media is bad or evil, but you do share how many people and kids are letting technology control them rather than the other way around. Can you share some day-to-day tips to make sure that we don't overuse technology?
Well, I think it's important that you note that I like technology. In fact, I'm a computer scientist, so I I study technology for a living. But what you said is exactly right. Where we get in trouble is where instead of using technology to support things we really care about, we instead let technology use us, and that gets us away from the things we care about. And so what I actually talk about in the book is that if someone feels like the technology in their life is really taking them away from things that are more important, they should consider actually taking a break. And I say take a 30-day break. That's my recommendation. And during this break where you're away from all of these different technological forces, I suggest that you actually sit back and figure out, what is it really that I like to do? What makes me happy? What do I care about? And then when you're done with the break, rebuild your digital life from scratch, except for this time, do it with a lot of care and say, okay, what technology is going to help these things I really care about? And what's the right way to use these technologies to get the most benefit as possible? So just like Marie Kondo says, if your closet is feeling cluttered, take everything out and only put back in the stuff you really love. I think people should do the same thing with their digital life. Take everything out for a little bit and then only add back the things that give you a lot of value.
I actually did a 21-day technology fast last summer, and I'll be doing it again this summer. I go away to a sleepaway camp where they don't allow any technology, no phones, no iPads, no computers, and if we want to communicate with our parents, we have to send a postcard in the mail. I actually must say that I really enjoyed it. I didn't miss the technology at all, and I really got to make close connections with the other campers in a way that I would not have done if everyone was on their phones all day. We also have certain rules at our house, for instance, no phones at the dinner table, and it's good to reinforce these rules on kids and parents. And Apple introduced a feature called Screen Time, which allows you to control how much time you can spend on a particular app. So this all helps with technology and taking away that time that you'd be staring at your phone, watching a monkey in the zoo fling poop at people, when you could actually be thinking and doing something that you think is boring. So for you, what do you normally do when you're not doing your work and when you're not on your computer? Because for the amazing computer scientist.
Well, it's a good question. So in addition to being a writer, I'm not only a computer scientist, but a theoretical computer scientist, which means I mainly solve equations on chalkboards as opposed to actually doing things with computers. So in my world, it's already really well known that the ability to concentrate is your number one skill. Just like if you were a runner, what you would care about is how fast is your 100-meter sprint. In the world of applied mathematicians, what we really care about is how good are you at focusing. So I take it really seriously. So for example, I've never had a social media account. I may be the only person my age for which that's true. But it is true. I've never had a social media account. I also don't web surf. For the most part, I don't use the internet for idle entertainment. But on the other hand, I'm a big fan of blogging and have been blogging for more than a decade. And I love podcasts. And I listen to great podcasts such as your own on a regular basis. I think that's really great. But for the most part, my use of technology is quite instrumental. I use it occasionally for things I really love, and that's about it. It's not at the center of my life. And so what am I doing otherwise? Well, I'm mainly spending time with my family, with my 3 young boys, with my wife. We like to do lots of activities, lots of sports. In the summer, we spend time at the pool. And when I have time to myself after they're in bed, I read a lot of books, which is something that I've always enjoyed. And so my life has tech. And when I use the tech, I get a lot of value out of it. But it's just something sort of on the side, something I deploy strategically when I need it, as opposed to being the backdrop of my daily experience as it is for so many people.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, that's a hard question. I have a really hard time answering that because I read lots and lots of books because I write professionally. I'm usually reading 6 or 7 books at a time. So I don't know what my favorite is, but I can tell you today I have been reading a book by the Brown University Revolutionary War historian Gordon Wood. It's a short monograph or chronicle books that really summarizes the conditions that led to the American Revolution. To me, those are the type of things I love. You pick up a book that a really smart people wrote, and you learn something really smart about something important, and you come away saying, wow, I'm really happy that I read that. And so I can't say which one I love. For me, it's usually whatever I picked up last. That's what in the moment I love the most.
Same thing with me. Like, I read so many books, like sometimes 2 at a time, one in my classroom, one at home, and then one on my Kindle. And it's usually the one that I just put down is the one that's my favorite, but Harry Potter is my favorite of all time. Have you ever read the Harry Potter books?
I have. I think that's a pretty good choice. If you have to get down to a favorite, I think that's a pretty good choice. I actually wrote about in one of my books, I guess in Deep Work, I wrote about how J.K. Rowling, when she was working on the Deathly Hallows, she was distracted a lot because they were doing work on her house. So there was workmen all around and her kids were around and there was a lot of distractions. And what she actually did to finish that book is she rented out a hotel suite at the Ballamore Hotel in Edinburgh, a famous old hotel. And she went there where there was 0 distractions. And it was amidst that focus of no distractions that she actually crafted and finished the final book in the Harry Potter series.
That's awesome that she thought of that. I would think of just to go to like my friend's house and just stay there. But that's really cool. What's your number one inspiration for all the things that you do?
Well, it's a good question. I think what drives the writing I've been doing recently is that, I study technology. I'm a computer scientist, but these technologies have a big impact on people's lives. And technology really plays a big impact. It can make people's lives much, much better. It can also make people's lives much, much worse, depending on what happens and how they use them and what's exposed to them. And so to me, I think it's important that we have technologists out there who also write about the impact of these technologies on people. And I think it's just a really important topic right now. And it makes me really happy, and it's really motivating and inspiring for me to know that I'm not just helping to work on new tech, but I'm thinking about what impact it has. And so that drive to impact people's lives, to make people's lives better, has been a huge inspiration for the writing I've been doing in the past few years.
What do you consider the greatest achievement of your life thus far?
Oh, I'd probably say my 3 kids. They're young, but they're growing up to be great young gentlemen, and so that's probably the hardest thing I've done and the thing I'm most proud of.
If you go back in time and talk to your 10-year-old self, what would you say would be the best advice?
Well, after I tell him to invest in Google stock right after they go public, more seriously, probably what I would say is that everything that's sort of interesting and meaningful and impactful that you can do is probably harder and takes a little bit more time than you think. Don't be discouraged about it. Get started as early as possible. Stick with the things you're thinking are important. Don't be discouraged if after 1 year or 2 years you're not seeing huge results, because the reality is sometimes it might take 10 years before really cool things happen, but the cool things do happen. So stick with it. If it's not hard, it's probably not worth doing.
I have a couple last questions for you, Cal, before we wrap up this interview. What trait do you have that has enabled you to take your big dreams and make them reality?
Well, the one thing I've always emphasized, and I learned this from actually reading Steve Martin, the comedian Steve Martin's biography. He emphasized in that biography that the most important thing he had in his life was diligence. And the way he defined diligence is it's not just about sticking with the same thing. It's also saying no to all the other things as well, so that you can keep your attention on a small number of things. And that's more or less been my motto. I decided at a pretty early age, I want to do computer science and I want to write important books. And I have just diligently and stubbornly worked at that as hard as I possibly can, month after month, year after year. And it turns out that if you look up a decade later, some pretty cool things are happening. So I think that stubborn diligence, that willingness to ignore the other interesting things that maybe come along or could maybe distract you or could maybe derail you down some side tracks, and just keep coming back again and again at the thing I think I want to do, the thing I want to build my life around, the thing that's important. That diligence has been really crucial for me.
When you have doubted yourself in the past, what made you overcome those fears and continue to pursue your dream?
Well, there's two things that have been important to me in that respect. One is I've always had two things going on. So I've been working at computer science and I've been working at writing. And that turned out to be a fortuitous decision, because it means when one of those things is having obstacles or is going hard, I could usually turn to the other thing and say, well, at least that's kind of going well right now. And then when that thing would go into a rut or I'd have some difficulty with it, I could turn into the other thing and say, well, at least this thing is going okay right now. The other thing I learned early on is to focus on process, not short-term results. So to take more pride in, I like how I'm working on this. I like how I'm training. I like how I'm getting better. I like how I'm approaching this part of my life, as opposed to saying, what happened this month? Did I have success or failure? Did things go well this year or not? So by focusing on process instead of just the immediate outcomes, you can find satisfaction even during the ups and the downs.
You've already made many of your dreams a reality, but if you look at yourself today, what's your big dream for the future?
Well, I think I'm just scratching the surface and really trying to understand the sort of impacts of tech on culture. And I think what I want to try to do is, with the books I'm working on now and the writing I'm doing now, is that I really want to expand the positive good I have on our culture in terms of how we interact with tech. I think this is something that we're just starting to think seriously about, and there's a lot of room for a lot of growth. And I have a lot of big ideas I'm working on that are very exciting to me, and I want to get better, and I want to keep producing, and I want to keep publishing, and I think there's a lot of cool work to be done.
And for our last question, Cal, since you don't have any social media or Instagram or Facebook, where can our audience find out more about you?
Well, I have a website, calnewport.com, which I host on a server that I own in a data center in Michigan. I'm a very old school internet type of guy, and I have been blogging on there since 2007. You can find out about my books and who I am and my writing. You can also read over a decade's worth of my essays, all on that one simple website.
Thank you so much, Cal. And big dreamers, make sure that you go check Cal out at calnewport.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cal, for such an insightful interview. I really am looking forward to my technology fast this summer at camp. And I know my family is excited to implement many of your strategies in our home. As always, all the links to everything we discuss are on our show notes at dreambigpodcast.com/144. Did you enjoy this special episode? If so, please tell your friends and family about the Dream Big Podcast. If everyone listening can just tell one person about this episode, that would lead to a chain reaction that would get the Dream Big Podcast in front of so many new people, which would be amazing. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified whenever we release a new episode. Finally, if you're interested in being part of the Dream Big Academy, please go to dreambigpodcast.com/beta. And right now, we are giving away the Confidence Secrets course for free. Have your parents go to dreambigpodcast.com/beta to get the free course that includes over 1 hour of me teaching you how to become more confident, which is the key to achieving your big dreams. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Eva Cartman reminding you that you have unlimited potential. Your dreams are not optional, you need to make them essential. So take massive action to turn those big dreams into reality. Live with passion, the way life was meant to be. I'll see you next episode. Bye!